I'm excited to introduce you to our guest, Nancy Erickson. Nancy is the owner of the book Professor and Stonebrook Publishing. Nancy, welcome on the show.
Thanks, Tori. I appreciate being here.
So tell us a little bit about who you are and these two amazing companies that you own.
I actually own two book-related businesses. One is called the Book Professor, and that's where we help people, we're usually coaches and speakers and, consultants and entrepreneurs to write what we call a high-impact nonfiction book. And your book should do three things for you. It should establish you as an expert in your field. It should increase your credibility, and it should help you to attract a following. Yeah. So I developed this step-by-step process where we take you from your idea all the way through the end game to the finished product, which is on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and distributed throughout the world. So the one business is the Book Professor. The other is Stonebrook Publishing, which is my award-winning nonfiction publishing house.
That is so amazing. And this wasn't always your career, right? So
no. And people often ask me, how did you get into this? And it's like I got into it sideways. So my original career was in high tech, and I was a systems engineer for IBM. And then later I worked for Oracle Corporation and sold high-end software to really large corporations. But in about 17 years ago, my father was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor, and we knew he would only live about 7 months. And so I quit everything. Yeah. And I went down to Florida where my parents lived to be with them, during the time until my father passed away, and a little bit after with my mom, she was trying to deal with the grief and all.
Yeah.
And then when I came home, I was like, now what am I going to do? And you know what? It was really crazy, Tori. I felt like I had been released from something that had like a chokehold on me. So when you work in high tech, you often make a lot of money. And I mean like multiple six figures a year, which is what I was doing, which makes you not be able to quit, even if you hate it, because you're just locked in because of the money. But I don't know if I would have left if I hadn't had this life-changing situation happen. But I was glad that I did, because then I thought, now I can do what I really want to do. And what I had always wanted to do was to be a writer. And so I was kind of looking through things. I thought, I think I'll, kind of sharpen those skills. And I was looking through some classes, and I thought, well, I've already done those classes. So I ended up going back to school and getting a master's degree in writing, a master's of fine arts. Wow. And then when I graduated, they asked me to join the faculty to teach writing, which is really an advantage of being like one of the older students, They're a little bit more mature than the other folks. And so they asked me to join the faculty and teach writing, which I did. And at the same time, I started Stonebrook Publishing because I wanted to publish nonfiction. I was so drawn to nonfiction. You guys have to know, truth is stranger than fiction. It really is. But so I was really drawn to nonfiction. And so the first book that we published was written by a Holocaust survivor who had gone to school with Anne Frank. And we ended up doing the book release at their school in Amsterdam. And here's what's really cool about that. The only thing that was still existing in that area as the same as it was in the 40s when the Nazis occupied Amsterdam was the school. And then across the street was the bookstore. Those two things. So they ended up doing this incredible ceremony for I think it was 170 students who'd been murdered by the Nazis. And then we went across the street and did the book release. So it was so wonderful. Of course, it was all in Dutch, so I didn't know exactly what they were saying, but it was very moving.
Wow.
And in the second book I published, we ended up getting back cover endorsements for that from Sir Paul McCartney and Cindy Crawford. And I was like blown away. I'm like, I guess I know what I'm doing, because they wouldn't lend their name to these projects if they weren't really well done. But
Way
there
to
was,
set the bar high, Nancy. The
I,
first
I
two
know,
out the gate.
I know, I know. I was like, I can't believe this. But but there was a problem. So we strictly focus on nonfiction that will either save lives, change lives, or transform society. And we were getting a lot of manuscript submissions with a seed of that in there, but they were so poorly written that we couldn't do anything. We couldn't edit our way out of it. And so we couldn't, help those people. But the reason I even wanted to get into this was because we have so many problems in our world. We actually have a hard time naming them anymore, much less solving them. But I really believe that the answers are trapped inside people like you and your listeners. And that when you simply tell what you know, what you've discovered, what you've developed, what you've overcome, that you become the source of two things that people can't live without. And those two things are hope and help. And that when you write your nonfiction book, that's what you're offering people within the zone of your own expertise.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were getting manuscripts that had a seed of that in there. And then I was really struck by the fact that just because these people can't write doesn't mean they don't have a message. It doesn't mean that they don't have something that can change lives and save lives and transform society. Yeah. So I took a step back, and for a year, I didn't publish anything because I was writing this step by step by tiny little step process to help people who aren't writers to become authors of these high impact nonfiction books.
I love that
because became the Book Professor.
Yeah, and I love that because it's like you said, it's like everyone has a story inside of them, whether they know it yet or not. There's a story in there, and it's just a matter of getting them to realize how the story or their truth or their knowledge or whatever can help others. Because like for myself, there's things that I know and I'm like, oh, it's just normal for me, right?
I know.
It's just common knowledge, but to everybody else, it's totally different. And so it's like turning the perspective around to help people understand that and know that there's a story inside of you that you can make a difference with. And so I love that you've kind of married both of them, right? The publishing side and then helping these, business professionals who may not have thought that they had the opportunity to do so, write a book.
Well, the statistics are something like 85% of people have thought of writing a book. And I guarantee that your listening audience, the person that's listening right now, has thought about it. But how would you know how to do that if you've never done it before? And most people stumble because they don't know how to get started. Yeah. And so we have made this so easy for our clients, and the process really helps you to pull the idea out of you and frame it up and get it really targeted for your audience. So, I mean, people surprise themselves at how well they really do when they have a process to follow.
Well, and you have several different options in the company too, where you have different avenues of how they can get to the end goal of writing a book, where you can help them one-on-one, you can help them in a group setting, and then they have like a DIY almost. Talk about those processes that you have.
Well, yeah, and they all lead to the same place if you do the work, right? Books don't write themselves. But so we in every approach, we start with a series of foundational questions, which are intended to help you crystallize your message. And there are things like, why are you even doing this? What's your motivation? Who is your audience? Very specifically. And how will they be changed as a result of, taking in your message? So there's 12 of these questions. And so we end up distilling the answers down into a purpose statement. And what that says, what the purpose statement is, it's like a one sentence. The purpose of this book is to do this particular thing for this specific audience, period. You can't put everything in one book. Yeah. So you have to prioritize what's in there. So when you start thinking about what is going to be in your book, You think, well, does this deliver the audience to realize the purpose of the book? And if it does, it's in this book. If not, set it aside. You may be surprised yourself at how much other material you have for a later book.
Yeah.
So then once we have that purpose statement, we map out the entire contents of your book in a process that I developed called book mapping. And there are two kinds of book maps, and they are very cleverly named Bookmap 1 and Bookmap 2.
Keep it simple, right?
Yeah. So the first one is your personal story, and it usually ends up being the introduction for your book, because people can't learn from you if they don't know you, even more so in this day and age where everybody's trying to be transparent and show themselves for who they are. But in that first book map, I have a little story formula that I introduce you to, where you can tell your story. And it's kind of like where you are, how you got to be where you are right now, in this point of helping other people to achieve something in their lives.
Yeah.
And then the second map is your chapter map, book map 2. And we have to build a structure, Tori, that you can follow as a writer, and that your audience and your readers can follow as they're reading, to make it simplified for them, to make it logical, so that they don't lose track of what's going on. So in order to do that, we build your chapters out in problem solution sets. And then the first step is you name the problems that your audience is likely to have. And then we teach you a very story-driven methodology for presenting your solutions. So you're telling stories all the time, because you not only want to educate and inform your readers, you have to entertain them. And if you want to keep them reading, you have to tell stories. And that's what locks it in there. I mean, people often say, well, what if I just don't tell the stories? I said, well, that's a textbook, you know, and we're not writing that. That's a nonfiction type of book, but that's not what we're writing. So anyway, so at the end, what you have in these maps, a book map is a visual representation, kind of like a mind map of your book. So that at the end, when you're finished, I mean, we put on there every story you're going to tell, every object lesson, every point you're going to make, every example, everything. So that when you sit down and we're ready to write your first draft, you have leapfrogged, and there's no such thing as writer's block. Because what is writer's block? It's just sitting there fiddle farting around, not knowing what you're supposed to do. But when you have these book maps, you're going to know. And then you'll be in execution mode, where you're kind of button the seat and fingers on the keyboard and pouring out your whole first draft.
Yeah.
So to answer, that was kind of a long way around getting to your question.
No, it's fine.
As I work with people is on a one-to-one basis. We work together to do those book maps, and we do those together, just you and I. And since most of my clients aren't in my location, you know, they're throughout we have a lot of international clients too. We do it over Zoom, and it's 6 90-minute Zoom sessions.
Yeah.
And then once we have it mapped out in the one-to-one approach, you will write a chapter and send it to me to edit while you're writing the next chapter. So it's kind of this is round robin juggling till we get the book finished. The second and most popular way I work with people is through group masterminds. And we have, those are cohorts of 5 to, it's capped at 7 people. And we do all that book mapping, and then we move into writing your first draft. And then you do a lot of, the third module is about editing and polishing everything up. But you're doing that as a cohort, as a group of other people. And it's really cool, because I don't know, in the beginning, everybody just has their idea, and at the end they have books that they've done. And it's really good to be able to banter around your ideas with other people who are also, you know, high achieving, intelligent people like you. And normally you might think, oh, they're going to be critical of my book. And they're actually not. They're so supportive. They'll be, and then at the end, when your book is finished, you know it's good because it's been vetted by these other people in your cohort. So that's really fun.
I love
and
that.
then the other version, which you mentioned is kind of the DIY version, and it is because you get none of me or any of our other group coaches, but it's the same process that the people follow in the mastermind, but you're doing it on your own.
Wow.
So yeah, but they all end up, they all lead to the same result, which is a finished book manuscript.
So cool. That is
Yeah.
so cool. I love that because I'm a very processed person, right? Like,
Yes.
and the step-by-step process, it reminds me of like like a marketing roadmap, like what I build.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it's like the process that you go through and all of these years of doing marketing for me specifically is like, I didn't realize there was a formula or a step-by-step process. And so it's kind of similar to like you. It's like, there's I've got these books that are being published, or there's common challenges that authors are having, or people who could be authors that aren't even getting started because of this process that needs to be put into place. And once you have a plan, you follow the plan and you meet the goal.
And that you're exactly right, Tori. And it's going to take you a year to write your book. And people always say, oh, why is it taking a year? First of all, I don't believe in those write your book in a weekend or a month thing, because I don't know what they're writing. It's not it can't possibly be a book. But here's a couple reasons why a year. First of all, we work with busy professionals who are running their business. They're entrepreneurs, they're business owners, they're coaching people, and nobody quits their day job to write a book.
Right.
So it's chunked in a way that you can actually get it accomplished and finished. But here's the other thing that's probably even more important. And it's that while you're working on your book is working on you. And it needs time to breathe and to become, and things are going to come into your life that need to be in this book during that time period. And you just need to allow it time. So a year goes by so fast. Yeah. And it goes by even if you don't write your book. So if the sooner you get started, you'll have something to show for it.
So there's so many reasons for people to write a book, but why do you think that a book really increases credibility for a business professional in this specific situation?
Well, let me give you another tidbit here, and this will answer that question. So remember when I said that your book is constructed in problem solution sets?
Yeah.
When you're finished, so every chapter you're solving a problem. And so when you're finished, you should be able to take every chapter out and repurpose that material for other revenue producing products, such as keynote speeches or seminars or workshops or online classes or video training or podcast material, etc. Yeah. So the way that you gain credibility. So if you want a bigger audience, you need a bigger platform. And so the way that you gain more credibility is to be present in all these other places. And the other thing too is a book can only increase your credibility if it's well done. And true. That's I can't emphasize that much. People give me their self-published books all the time, and I think it's so amazing that they wrote a book, because it's hard, it's a big effort, and they probably spent a lot of money on it. But if they don't know what the conventions are in publishing, and frankly, it all starts with the writing. If their book hasn't been professionally edited and proofread, it's going to be a mess. Yeah. And but self-publishing is, a lot of people consider it like do it yourself. Oh, we'll do our own cover. That's not what it means. It just means that you are in charge of the process and in charge of pulling all the professionals together. And if you don't know what is involved in a professional publishing project, you're going to miss some steps. So sometimes people will give me their books and I'm like, oh my gosh, please don't give this to anybody else. Because if you meant to increase your credibility, you've trashed it by having something that doesn't look as good as you are.
Right.
Yeah. So we like the professional approach.
For sure, especially if your goal is to increase your credibility and become a thought leader or authority in a specific niche or topic or space. you want to have a professional product that
you
you
have
put
to
out.
have a professional presence. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so you touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear, okay, now we've published a book. What's next?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So just like books don't write themselves, they don't market themselves either. And I am not a marketer. And so we don't do book marketing, but we partner very closely with other people in the industry who do so. And so some authors are interested in becoming Amazon bestsellers. And if that's the case, then we'll introduce them to a partner who does that. Others are interested more in having like a publicist who will be more like marketing you, and your book is part of that. And we've had some other really cool partners who help people market their books through podcast guesting, which is really neat. So the whole thing about marketing is that you want to get outside of the circle that you've already curated for yourself and into somebody else's circle. So there are professionals that help you do that, and we introduce you to them.
I love that.
And the other thing too, Tori, is that your book isn't possibly, well, it could. I mean, there's a long shot that it would be a New York Times bestseller, but it's not likely that would happen. So in the very beginning, we want to make sure that we define what your goals are for your book. And for business people, usually, it's a business expense. So how do you justify that? So how many more clients would you have to get as a result of, publishing the book? How many other speaking engagements? How many other people coming to you that need your help? So we want to right size things, and we want to make sure that the expectations are reasonable and attainable.
Yeah. And I think, some people look at an author and think, oh, they must make a lot of money off of their book. Well, it's probably not the book necessarily that's making the profit, right? It's everything that comes along after it, the workshops, the speaking engagements,
right.
All of the different business that you get in from the authority and the credibility that you've built from writing this book. So it's just an avenue of exposure and credibility and growing your audience.
Yeah, you got it.
Love that. So okay, so one final question. So you work with a lot of business professionals, and now they're becoming authors. Is there, and I know marketing's not necessarily your avenue, but is there a difference from what you've seen in a marketing approach for authors versus businesses or the professionals? Or do they match together once they become an author?
In their own marketing approaches, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Well, they all need help. So, and everybody's always trying to look for the silver bullet in marketing and all. So, and you understand that. One of the thing that has really come up a lot lately is podcasts. Podcasts, and a lot of our authors start their own podcasts. Podcasts are hot as fire. I got to tell you what, people listen to them all the time while they're commuting, while they're exercising, while they're, fiddling around in the kitchen and such. And so that is what I've seen change, is that podcast marketing is a real thing, and it's also very effective.
Yeah.
But I mean, what do you think? I mean, you're a podcaster, so I mean, do you agree with that?
I totally agree. I think it's an untapped market that is now emerging, right? But when I started my podcast a little over a year ago, I saw the trend in podcasting like completely growing, right? And I knew, as a marketing agency and a marketer myself, in order to differentiate myself from my competitors or other agencies, that podcasting was a good avenue to go. And so I think it's very similar with authors, right? So authors who leverage the podcast marketing space are going to amplify their story, their presence, their business, their book, all of the things that come along with it, because there's such an exponential amount of reach that comes from podcasting that in the typical.
What we're talking about is your brand, right?
Right.
You're extending your brand beyond what you can do yourself, because like like we talked about, if you want a bigger audience, you need a bigger platform. You need to be cooperative with other people who have the audience you want to reach. So it's a big opportunity.
I love that. Well, so I would love for you to give one piece of advice to end the show, and that would be something for someone who doesn't think that they can be a writer, be an author. What would you tell them?
Well, the hardest part about writing your book is making the decision to get started, because we've made it easy for you. I mean, it really is easy. But I do want to say this, because, and Tori, you and I were talking about this a minute ago, is that just because you've had your life, you may think it's not very interesting, or that it's not very, or that people wouldn't want to read your book. And I want to totally disagree with that, because you're the only one who has been what you've been through, who's overcome what you've overcome, who's maybe developed something that you've developed, and you're the only one who can do it. And people sometimes will say to me, I mean, like, who am I to write a book? I've only done this,
Right. They underestimate
and I'm like,
themselves.
who are you to keep it to yourself? Don't hide your light under a bushel, as they say. Let us help you get your brilliance out into the world. And then it leads to so many other things. And it's fun. And you're going to be more happy than you can ever remember when you hold that book in your hand. So we really are here to help.
I love that. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for being on the show and giving us this insight to what you do and the passion, the purpose that comes from you and your businesses. And just, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Well, thanks. And can I just throw one more thing in? If
Absolutely.
people want to get in touch with me, the website is thebookprofessor.com. And there's a link across the top that says schedule a call with Nancy. I absolutely love talking about book ideas, and I welcome your call. And, we have these masterminds starting on a regular basis. So we would love to have you be part of one of those.
Well, awesome. Definitely go check it out. If you've ever had any inkling of being an author, writing a book, or just curious about it, go talk to Nancy and she will point you in the right direction.